Welcome back to John Orfer's Note. It's been quite a momentous week in the energy sector. BP has given up its joint venture TNK-BP and instead taken a 20% stake in Rosneft, the giant Russian oil producer, which is the world's biggest listed oil producer. With me to discuss the ramifications of all this for the markets and for the sector is Stefan Wagstall, the FT's Emerging Markets Editor. Stefan, just to begin with, what's the significance of everything we've seen this week?
It's a very big deal for Russia and for the oil industry. We see Rosneft turned into the world's largest listed producer by taking out both the partners in the TNK-BP joint venture. It's buying the share owned by BP and the share owned by AAR, the Russian oligarch consortium.
Okay, let's look at our first chart, which shows the BP share price. The question, of course, is this a good deal for BP?
Of course, like everything, we won't know for a very long time. Investors liked the deal when they first heard wind of it. The main reason is that it gets BP out of a very troublesome joint venture, one that's been very lucrative, but one that has prevented them from developing a strategic view of Russia.
But they're only taking a 20% stake in Rosneft, so they don't have control. That's a risk.
No, and that's exactly where you see the share price, the improvement in sentiment tailing off here. So the first reaction is relief. We've broken with the troublesome oligarchs. The second reaction is that concern. We are now pairing with a state-owned company, a state-controlled company, in which the Kremlin has 70% and BP will only have 20%. So it will be an argument as to how much influence BP will really have.
Of course, BP has problems, of course, in the US as well. Is this going to counterbalance that in its global strategy?
Well, of course, if this venture goes well in Russia and great new reserves are developed in the Arctic, of course, yes. But we're talking here of 20 years out. We won't know for a very long time. But this is the kind of bet that a company like BP has to make. This is what the oil majors have to do.
We talked about risks, and obviously one of the risks in many people's ideas is the risk of doing business in Russia. If we take a look at our second chart, we have some price to earnings ratios showing how cheap or expensive the various markets are. Perhaps you could just talk us through what this chart is showing.
Well, the main thing it shows you is what a large discount there is on Russian equities versus the emerging market average. And that's been true for some time. And it's a discount which reflects a couple of things. One is the Russian market is dominated by energy and resource producers, which tend to have lower Ps because of their cyclical earnings. And the second is a big political discount for Russia.
So what we have here is we have Russia down the bottom looking really quite cheap.
Yes.
When you compare it against emerging markets overall.
Yes.
But also when you compare it against the energy sector.
Well, compared to the energy sector, it doesn't look too bad. But then Russian reserves are cheaper and very large in themselves. So you might, if other things were equal, namely if Russian reserves were somehow in Canada, you would find these much more highly rated. But they're not. You have this political discount, and I don't think that will go away. Or put it another way, President Putin and his associates will have a lot of work to improve that lowly rating.
Yes, what does this mean for investors then? I mean, if you're saying that green line is going to stay low, presumably it's a warning sign.
Well, it divides the bulls and the bears. The bulls say this is a perfect opportunity because there is so much upside. Yeah. And the bears say that the discount is there for a reason, and there's no justification for thinking that the Kremlin's basic economic policies will change anytime soon.
Okay, there's obviously the Vladimir Putin factor, who's been quite involved in this deal. I mean, you're talking 20, 30 years' time. Presumably, investors have to take a long-term view on Russia's prospects and political prospects.
Yes, they do. But I would bet that the Putin administration, the people around him, will be in charge for some time to come. I wouldn't say 20 years, who knows in 20 years, but certainly for the next 5.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So oil is a big, exciting sector, but you also have to look in a very long-term perspective as well.